online to help you answer any questions that you may have. I'm Amanda Jackson. I'm a grants and projects analyst, and I work primarily on the state and local cybersecurity grant program. And then here in the Southern Nevada office, we also have Angelica Garcia. She goes by Bell, and she helps with the state and local cybersecurity grant program as well as supporting the Southern Nevada office.
Hi, my name is Carrie Beach. I'm the program officer, and I touch a little on all the grants.
Hi, I'm Jay Giovacchini. I'm another one of the grants and projects analysts. My specialization is NSGP, Nonprofit Security Grant Program, but I know a little bit about all of the programs, lucky me. So I will periodically be jumping in to answer questions.
And hi, my name is Zach Adler. I am the supervisor over the team who's putting on this presentation for you all. Thanks everyone for attending. I know it was kind of short notice and a pretty narrow window, so it means a lot to see all of you here. We are going to try to get a recording out after the presentation, but of course, at the speed everything moves, that could be a little while before that hits. So thanks again for attending, everyone.
If you have any questions as you go, please put them in the chat and we'll answer them as we can, or we'll have a Q&A session at the end to answer the ones that we didn't get to. We're also adding a link to our presentation survey in the chat so we can hear your feedback on what you liked, what you'd like to learn more about, or if we missed anything. We're also using the survey to record attendance, so just please make sure you fill that out sometime between now and November 1st so we can get that recorded. So we invited our partners from FEMA to share their presentation on the top 10 mistakes when purchasing under grants. So I'm going to go ahead at this time and turn it over to Heather and Megan from FEMA Region 9, and then they're going to take it away with this part of the presentation.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Megan Bryant. I am the Acting Grant Services Branch Chief at FEMA Region 9, and I'm excited to be here to share this information with you. Presenting alongside of me will be Heather Landeros and Paula Tejada. They are also members of our grants team. And like Amanda said, as we go through the presentation, please put your questions in the chat where we have Chris Simone from our Procurement Disaster Assistance team, and he was going to monitor the chat and assist us in answering your questions, as well as we also have some of our grants program folks listening in on the presentation as well if there are any program questions come up. Go ahead, Heather. You can next slide. So the game plan for this afternoon, you'll gain general knowledge of the procurement rules, increase your awareness of the most common risk areas that we find, and learn about available tools and resources. And some hot topics that we'll discuss will be the difference in rules applicable to states and non-state entities in your case, requirements for sole sourcing, and also problematic contract types. Go ahead, Heather. So as you can see on this very large number, procurement noncompliance is very costly. From 2010 to 2017, FEMA's program audits found almost $806 million in potentially ineligible contract costs, primarily in the two areas of full and open competition and affirmative steps, which will be covered in more detail by Heather and Paula. And 69% of these negative findings resulted in recommendations to return the funds. So this is a very important piece of our process when we're in our grant award process. Go ahead, Heather. And listed below is our uniform rules that are listed under 2 CFR 200. Specifically for procurement, it's now 317 through 327, and those are the various areas of the procurement to use when you are creating your contracts with your vendors. Go ahead, Heather. And just a quick update, OMB updated actually this section of the 2 CFR back in November of 2020. So prior to November of 2020, the procurement regulations were 317 through 326 for awards or disasters declared before that date. So those are the rules to follow. And for disasters and awards declared after that date, the rules slightly adjusted. They added one. Now it's 317 to 327. Go ahead, Heather. So obviously, when you're addressing the uniform rules, it's whether or not you're a state or a non-state entity. In this case, we're non-state entities. So these are the rules that apply to the state entities. And then these are the rules that apply to the non-state entities, which are local governments, tribes, hospitals, institutions of higher education, and other nonprofits. So the main rules that you'll follow are 318 through 327. But you first must follow your own rules and your policies and procedures, plus state or tribal law, and these procurement standards as well. Heather? So now I'll introduce Paula, and she's going to start with the top 10, 1 through 5 of the procurement mistakes that we've seen when processing our grant awards.
Thank you, Megan. I hope everybody can hear me. So now that we've covered the basics, the format for the rest of the presentation is going to focus on the top 10 most common procurement mistakes that we see when purchasing under grants. And these are the 10 topics we will be discussing. They're right here on your screen. So we'll provide an overview quickly, and then we will dive into each topic one at a time. So on your left-hand side, you see 1 through 5, and we'll be talking about those top mistakes that we made that was so well put in that second slide that we saw with that big number that the auditors found as, question costs. We'll be looking at full and open competition as well as sole sourcing and how that can be something that can affect, competition. Then on the right-hand side, we're going to be touching on the 6 through 10, and that will include what type of contracts we can use and which we won't be using in any situation. We'll also be talking about clauses and how it's important to document. Okay, so on to the first mistake. And remember, this is the top mistake made. So let's pay attention here to make sure that we're not the ones making this mistake. Restricting full and open competition. Full and open competition is one of the main principles of the procurement rules, full stop. The goal of the full and open competition is to cast the net broadly. By doing this, we can ensure that we're going to get a fair and reasonable price and that we most certainly can get a qualified contractor to do the work. Other benefits from practicing full and open competition is, of course, avoiding favoritism. And we want to make sure that we stay away from fraud, waste, and abuse by having a full and open competition. So 2 CFR 200, precisely 319, will describe 7 situations that would actually affect full and open competition. So we want to steer away clear from these. And you have them listed here as bullet points, but I'm going to quickly go through them. Requiring unnecessary experience. What that speaks to is, let's say that you're building a house and you need to put a roof on the house. Well, when seeking bids and solicitations, you want to be sure that you are describing what you need specifically and not seeking out an expert that would be let's say an expert in putting roofs on a high rise or buildings. You want to make sure that it's specific to what you need. Or for instance, that it has the appropriate number of years of experience. This can be, if you're, for instance, requiring 40 to 50 plus years of experience building a roof, that may not necessarily necessarily be a requirement if you're putting a roof over a house, to have that much experience. Another situation that you want to avoid is excessive bonding requirements, non-competitive pricing practices, conflicts of interest within the organization, non-competitive contracts, and the such. It's also important to be sure that the use of geographical preferences is prohibited in the evaluation of bids or proposals. There are some exceptions to these rules. For instance, tribal governments might give a priority to Indian-owned business enterprises, and this, of course, would be allowed by these federal guidelines. Okay, here's mistake number 2, not performing a cost or price analysis. So this slide gives you a good overview of what this means. Basically, a non-state entity must perform a price or cost analysis when with every procurement action above the simplified acquisition threshold, and that's set at $250,000, as described as 2 CFR 200-324. The method and degree of analysis will depend on the facts and the circumstances surrounding the particular procurement. So the non-state entity must make independent estimates before receiving those bids and proposals. So your goal is to be fair and reasonable, and you can do this by conducting 2 kinds of analysis. As stated, price analysis, which is much simpler and broad, examining the entire proposed price as a whole, and the cost analysis that delves into actually, the detailed components, the cost elements, such as labor hours or overhead. And we need to make sure that the non-state entity shall negotiate profit as a separate element of price. This is something that can occur, that we can overlook, we can commonly overlook. So that's something to look out for. Thank you, Heather. Mistake number 3 and number 4 are listed on this slide. And we're going to talk about sole sourcing and some common issues that arise. So mistake number 3 is engaging in sole sourcing without documenting permissible exceptions. And the standards are clear regarding the need to have a full and open competition. However, there are limited situations in which you can have instances where these are allowed. For example, micro purchases. These are permissible for procurements under $10,000 and where non-state entities can procure directly from one vendor, as long, of course, as the price is fair and reasonable. Then you also have listed here items available only from a single source, or if there's an emergency circumstance. If there's inadequate competition, meaning that after the solicitation of a number of bids, competition is still determined inadequate. And of course, if the awarding agency or the pass-through entity has provided the necessary approval. It's also very important to remember that regardless of what exemptions exist, you must document your justification for using sole sourcing. I don't know if anybody here in the group has had a chance to engage in these type of exceptions. If you have, I invite you to comment in the chat and share with us if you've ever used micro purchases or had to go to sole sourcing or use sole sourcing in an emergency circumstance. Number 4 is continuing to work under sole source contract after an emergency has ended. So what you want to remember here is that you can only use sole source contract during the actual period of the emergency. And I want to stress the actual period when it starts, and that is start and end of that emergency. As soon as it ends, you must transition to a competitive method of procurement. So for instance, today we experienced an earthquake here, not too far from where FEMA headquarters for our region is situated in Oakland, California. Actually, I think Megan was pretty close to the epicenter, and that's scary, right? In that situation, if something were to happen where if there needs to be immediate evacuation and there are down poles or trees, those need to be removed so that everybody can evacuate. That is the emergency, and whatever contractors are used or whatever work is done to remove that and make that exit available, that is when you can use sole sourcing. Once that is on the side of the road, whatever it is, branches, foliage, debris, then you must use an acceptable method of procurement where you have full and open competition. Okay, and now this is mistake number 5, not making and documenting efforts to take all socioeconomic affirmative steps. And I'd like to remind you, this is actually number 2 on that slide that auditors were so kind to let us know what we needed to pay attention to. So this, after full and open competition, this is certainly a slide that you want to understand. So both state and non-state applicants must take the necessary affirmative steps to make sure that small and minority businesses, women-owned enterprises, and labor surplus area firms are used whenever possible. Before, it was only non-state entities that were required to do so, but as of the updates that Megan mentioned earlier, now both states and non-state entities have to take these affirmative steps. The affirmative steps are listed here on the right hand of the slide. I want to bring your attention to them. What I would like to point out is number 3. Divide total requirements into feasible, smaller tasks. We think this is actually pivotal when it comes to implementing the 6 steps, and I'll explain why with an example. For instance, going back to that example of when you're building a home or house, you may want to break down, the project scope of building a home into smaller, more reasonable, and specialized tasks, right? This way, those small businesses that are focused and specialized in, let's say, plumbing or the roofing or building the walls, each one can access or can bid for that particular task, instead of having big business come in and be the only one that is able to accomplish the entire scope of work as is described as the total requirement. And I'd just like to remind you to please justify all efforts with documentation. Heather, it's all yours.
All right. And so just a reminder, folks, if you have any questions, drop them directly into the chat. and we will respond to them as they come up. And if you have a question, there's a decent chance that the other folks on the call probably have that question too, especially when it comes to socioeconomic contracting. Put those questions in the chat. All right, so on this slide, we're going to cover two problematic contracts types. So the first is a time and materials contract. What is this? So a time and materials contract is a contract where the sum of the direct labor hours are charged at a fixed hourly rate, and then plus the actual cost of the materials. So you can only use a time and materials contract when it is not possible to determine the scope or the duration of work, and you've determined that no other contract is suitable. You see these more at the beginning of disaster responses, like with debris cleanup, and we also saw them at the very beginning of the COVID pandemic. But once the scope becomes clear, you need to switch, right? You need to switch to a different contract type. So we're not going to go into this too much because you really shouldn't see time and materials contracts with preparedness grants. So number 7 here, awarding a cost plus a percentage of cost contract. So what is this? So a cost plus a percentage of cost contract, or CPPC, would be like if a contractor charged you for the actual costs incurred and then added a fixed percentage on top of that for their profit or their overhead, like 10%. So these types of contracts are prohibited because there's no incentive for a contractor to control their costs. And because as the costs increase, so does their profit. So they could be buying the most expensive materials possible, because the more those materials cost, the more they would be profiting. So obviously, FEMA will not reimburse you for these types of contracts. And we'd really encourage you to work with whatever resources you have at your office, be it an attorney or your procurement staff, or check with the, your wonderful resources here with the state of Nevada. Read your contracts carefully to make sure these types of provisions aren't kind of like hiding in your contract, because they can be a little tricky to identify. All right, next we have number 8, not including the required contract clauses. So this is a requirement for both our state and our non-state entities, and it is one of the most common non-compliance findings. The good news is that you can use this contract provisions template here on the PDAT website, Procurement Disaster Assistance Team website. And this has additional guidance about which provisions are required and when, and then sample language that you can copy and paste into your own contracts. So this is the contract provisions guide, is an excellent resource. Ultimately, these clauses are here to protect you. For example, you want to be able to terminate a contract when you need it, right? You've got termination for cause or convenience. You don't want to be stuck paying for a service that you don't need anymore. Number 9, awarding to contractors who are suspended or debarred. So contracts should only be rewarded to responsible contractors who can perform successfully under the terms and conditions. When you look at their past performance, consider their integrity. Are they reputable? Can they provide you a bunch of great references for similar jobs, or did they just magically appear shortly after the disaster occurred? Do they have the technical and financial resources to finish the job? So, for example, I've seen a few cases, some with hastily made COVID contracts, and then also some cases with debris cleanup, where the contractor was perfectly reputable, but they really didn't have the technical know-how to be successful under a federal award, and the grantee didn't really have the capacity to get them up to speed. And so in both of these cases, they didn't itemize things correctly to account for what private insurance would have covered. And so ultimately, costs were questioned or disallowed when the transaction was reviewed. So you want to make sure that they, they're reputable, but also that that they can comply with all of the financial reporting requirements that might come up. Also, can they comply with public policy, right? Be on the lookout for discriminatory practices that might get you in trouble. Ultimately, you want to do your due diligence as if you were spending your own money. So after you determine that your contractor is responsible, go here to this sam.gov website and make sure they are not on the list of contractors who have been excluded from performing federally funded work. You cannot award contracts to the contractors on the naughty list. And make sure you've documented that this step has been taken, because even if you get lucky and they aren't on the naughty list, it is still an audit finding if you can't prove that you checked the list. So unfortunately, the high-profile nature of disasters can make recovering communities targets for fraud. There are multiple ways to report fraud or suspicious activities by phone, email, or websites through all of these contacts, which can be found on the PDAT website. And we'll give you these slides so that you'll have all of these links and contacts afterwards. Ultimately, if you see something suspicious or you come across a shady contractor, report it so that you can save other grantees or sub-grantees a headache of dealing with this particular contractor. And number 10 on our top 10 list of mistakes when purchasing under a FEMA award is not properly documenting all of the steps of a procurement. So document. You want to make sure that you maintain records that detail the history of the procurement so that you can demonstrate why you chose the particular method of procurement for each contract, including any justification for non-competitive proposal methods, why you selected the type of contract used, why you selected or rejected a particular contractor, and that your selected contractor is responsible and not on the sam.gov naughty list. And the basis for the contract price, which should include a price or cost analysis for any contracts exceeding $250,000, which is the simplified acquisition threshold. Documentation doesn't have to be lengthy or time consuming. It can be as simple as saving email correspondence on your department shared drive so that if you leave the agency, your colleagues who are managing the grant after you have records so they know what you did, who you checked with, important correspondence that happened. For example, sending an email to the Small Business Administration Minority Development Agency asking for some potential targeted firms that would help comply with socioeconomic contracting. Saving things like that, records that you took the steps. Because again, even if you get lucky and things are like compliant, you need to be able to document that you did all the steps and you checked the things you were supposed to check. Hey, so we've got some great tools and resources for you. There's ECFR is a great resource to look up the specific procurement rules there. The PDAT website, so that's the Procurement Disaster Assistance Team, This is where you'll find that great contract provisions template, again, where you can copy and paste that language into your contract. We have a webinar series there. You will see presentations similar to this, or presentations that are diving into like real specific topics. Example, debris cleanup or exigency or emergency circumstances. And then we have a self-paced training there too, so you can take it on your own time. So great webinars. We have fact sheets and checklists and more. So that's the PDAT website. It is fantastic. And then right, that SAM.gov contractor determination, that's the naughty list. Got to check and make sure your contractors are not on the naughty list. And also, you know, don't forget you've got your great folks here with the state of Nevada who are wonderful resources for all things grants. And this is the contact information for Megan, Paula, and myself. You're welcome to reach out to us. And thank you everyone for your participation.
Does anyone have any questions for our FEMA partners? And Chris, did we have any in the chat that we need to address, or were you able to get all those?
There's just one in the chat that I'm going to drop a link to the chapter in the PDAT field manual regarding architecture and engineering, and some of the considerations that can go into it's more considerations than rules specifically for architecture and engineering, and some exceptions. So I'm going to drop a link to the chat in there for Paul and his question.
Okay, great. Well, we're going to do Q&A again at the end of the presentations. So if you think of any questions, please let us know. Thank you, Megan, Paula, Heather, Christopher. I appreciate all you guys jumping on and doing that. Right, so
thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Right. Okay, well, moving along. How many would agree that grants often feel like this? The purpose of this training is to provide a little more explanation on the items we receive the most feedback on, which are compliance documents, Zoomgrants, quarterly reporting, and purchasing and procurement under federal grants, which our FEMA partners dived us into just a minute ago. Hopefully by the end of this training, we can take you from this to this.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jay with Nevada Division of Emergency Management. Generally speaking, DEM will look at, and we do look at and manage mitigation, recovery, and preparedness grants. For purposes of this presentation, we're going to be looking at the preparedness side of the operation and principally the 4 different funding sources that we look at for preparedness grants. The first 2 of these are basically fully funded types of grants, NSGP and HSGP, and I've got a slide for each of them. When I say fully funded grants, what I mean is that if you are granted $100,000 in award, you will get $100,000 throughout your grant cycle for the completion of your projects. NSGP grants, nonprofit security grant program. Typically, these grants are given to those individuals who qualify as nonprofit organizations under the IRS 501c3 program. But under certain circumstances, it's not necessary to be a 501c3 organization. There are certain churches and religious organizations that don't have to have that 501c3 authorization. When we look at the NSGP program, we look at, and if you take a look at the small box inside, we're looking at the ALN number that denotes the NSGP grant. The first 5 digits of that number is the CFDA number assigned by the federal government. The first 2 numbers denote the particular department within federal government. 97 is the Department of Homeland Security. The next 3 digits denote the specific program within DHS. In this particular case, NSGP is 008, and then the 0.23 is the year of that grant, the year that grant has been made. This is important because for your future potential information that you'll be giving to us, this may be one of the items that you will need to put into that that information request. The ALN number is also referred to within DEM as the job number. Very important, and we'll talk about that when we get to some of the other documentation that you have, including PCRs, if I can get to those. The next number, and this one becomes very, very important, it is the grant number. Each individual funding stream has its own grant number pursuant to that year's grant. In this particular case, the NSGP grant is EMW-2023, the grant year, -UA, the designation for NSGP grants for the 23 grant year, and then the individual grant number. In this particular case, for this particular year, it's 00040. This number will be particularly important for those sub-grantees who get to fill out things like the EHP, that is Environmental Historical Preservation Screening Form. This is where this number comes from, and this is the number that you will be using. As I said, this is a fully funded grant, and you get a $100,000 grant, you will receive $100,000 in reimbursements. The HSGP program is very similar to the NSGP program, except it is a little bit broad. Well, it's a lot broader. The ALN number still applies. However, in this particular case, the ALN number is once again 97, but the program itself is 067. The grant number is also different, so you'll need to make note of that. This grant is also one of those fully funded grants. If you are awarded $100,000, you will receive $100,000 for that program for that grant year. Please. The next 2 funding streams, EMPG, that is Emergency Management Performance Grant, and the SLCGP, we'll get to that in just a second, are match funded programs. As a lot of you know, the EMPG program is a 50-50 grant program. If you receive a grant for $100,000, you will receive $50,000 as your grant, and you will have to match $50,000 from your funding source. Next, please. The SLCGP program is our newest program. It is also a match-funded program, but the match for it works slightly different. We'll talk about that in just a second. The ALN number or job number is very similar. It's 97, 137.23. The grant number in this case has not been assigned yet. So please, as you get that grant, please be aware if you need to get that grant number, it will be forthcoming. In the case of the SLCGP grant program, it starts off with a 90-10 match split. That is 90% comes to the sub-grantee from the federal government and 10% will be the match that the individual sub-grantee has to match. In the second year, it's an 80-20 split. The third year, it'll be a 70-30 split. And in the fourth year, and right now, the fourth year will be the end of that grant, it'll be a 60-40 split. That's what we've got. Those are the 4 funding streams that we're looking at for the preparedness grant program for this grant cycle.
Oh gosh. All right. Thanks, Jay. We're going to talk a little bit about the compliance documents. So our FEMA partners already kind of touched on 2 CFR Part 200. Just to clarify, this is the master guiding document for all federal grants. It establishes uniform administrative requirements, cost principles, and audit requirements for federal awards to non-federal entities. You can always view the current version of 2 CFR Part 200 online, but you can also view the historical versions if you ever need to see those for a previous grant year that maybe you're still working in. Then we have the FEMA Preparedness Grants Manual. And this is also issued by the federal government, but this is updated yearly as each FEMA grant program evolves. It contains general information on how to manage all FEMA preparedness grants, and it also contains a section specific to each one of the preparedness grant programs. Each grant is going to have a notice of funding opportunity document, which will be available on FEMA's website. When the notice of funding opportunity, or the NOFO as we call it, is released, that's like the starting point of the grant when the clock starts ticking for the application period. But the state application period and the period of performance in the NOFO will be different than the subrecipient application period and period of performance. So watch for the bulletins that we send out through the DEM Grants listserv and go by those dates. This document will have all the details about each grant program specifically. Most of what's in here will pertain to how we administer the program, but it's good to familiarize yourself with this document because it contains valuable information related to eligibility, match requirements, and allowable projects. This is also a good place to get ideas for what kind of projects the federal government has in mind for each program. So for example, we received a lot of feedback from people that weren't sure what projects to apply for our SLCGP funding. But within the NOFO, there's sections that talk about program priorities and goals, which can help guide you to appropriate projects. And then we have the procurement policy for grants, which DEM manages, but we're going to talk a little bit more about this later. And then for all the documents covered in this section, check the fact sheet. We're going to give you helpful links so that you can get a little bit more detail than we're providing here today for you.
All right, in these slides, I want to talk about Zoom grants and quarterly reporting. Quarterly reporting consists of a quarterly financial report, QFR, and a quarterly progress report, a QPR. A project change request, a PCR, can be used to request changes to your award. PCR forms should be requested through the DHS grants email. And also in this section, I'd like to cover the Zoom Grants University and walking through the steps of changing contact credentials. Again, quarterly reporting consists of a QFR and QPR due within 30 days of the end of the quarter. An example of this would be a quarter ending 3/30 would be due 4/30. Zero reports have a place in quarterly reporting. It keeps an overall of the sequential order of the quarterly reports and shows where you may be experiencing some delays and troubles. When submitting a zero report, be sure to answer question 11 of the QPR, and that'll help us understand the issues you may be running into. When we see 3 consecutive 0 reports, we will reach out and offer some assistance to help you get through whatever you're going through. Or, excuse me.
One of the things with the quarterly reporting that we particularly have to watch for, it doesn't seem like a QPR is a quarterly progress report is that important. However, it is extremely important to us because on a quarterly basis, we have to report to the federal government with respect to the progress of each individual grant. Even if that grant does not have any progress on it, if no work has been done on that quarter, we still need that response back from you so that we can then make that report.
All right, here we're going to touch on late reporting. So late reporting, you'll receive a 10-day prior notice to the due date, letting you know that quarterly reporting is coming up. Then 1 day after the due date, another notice sent from Zoomgrants that will indicate that you're on a late reporting list. Again, at 14 days, you'll receive another notice through Zoomgrants indicating you are still on that late reporting list. At 30 days, you'll receive an email with an attachment through Zoomgrants indicating the next steps of what could happen if you don't get current on your quarterly reporting. At 60 days, an email and letter attached indicating that you could be coming up on deobligated funds. Okay, so here we're going to talk about quarterly reporting and backup documentation. So first, it's going to be a purchase plan that is the grant application and your budget. And then this is going to be made up of your application, your budget when you submitted, or that you submitted when you applied. 3 quotes. 3 quotes are required. 3 quotes are required to purchase up to $50,000. Yeah, 50,000. Here we've got competitive solicitation and contracts for purchases over $50,000. Oh my gosh. All right, guys.
You got it.
Can I just take a second to pause real quick?
Yes, you can.
I just want to make sure that for everyone online that these slides are progressing properly. We're progressing them in the room, but it seems like there might be some issues. Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Okay. All right, let me get back on track. Let's see, competitive for $50,000. And then we're going to have the SAM checks. FEMA touched on SAM checks quite a bit, and so here we have the link for you. And the SAM checks is required, which we talked. Should be done on all purchases. This is just a printout from SAM.gov showing that the vendor has no exclusions, which would exempt them from receiving federal funds. Next, we want to touch on invoices. So you just want to have invoices for anything that you had purchased. Proofs of payment. Proofs of payment can be, a bank statement or a cleared check. All right, and then your declining balance spreadsheet. So with your declining balance spreadsheet, we have noticed that some of them are submitted with missing information and broken formulas.
So we're gonna pause real quick.
Sure.
So sorry, guys, we're experiencing some technical difficulties. We're going to try to get a slide deck out to you guys in case issues persist, but we're going to try to troubleshoot on the fly. So please stand by.
It wasn't present, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
Because it seems like it's a mixed bag.
All right, bear with me, everyone. I'm going to try and reshare the presentation here. Okay, Carrie, did I get you back to where you left off?
We just need declining balance.
Planning balance. There you go. All right, it's all yours.
Thank you.
And just to make sure, Amanda, is my account a presenter account or is it just Carrie's?
It should be everyone from within internal in the state.
Okay.
But I'll get that PDF printed up and attach that to the chat as well. It's in case people need to follow along.
Outstanding. Okay. I'm gonna pass this back to Carrie.
Okay.
Control.
There you go.
Hey, Serge, we're gonna get a PDF sent out. It'll probably be dropped in chat shortly. That'll help you follow along. Just in the interest of everyone's time, I want to continue on the training, and then we will figure out any questions you have based off of that at the end.
Okay, then, I'm just gonna pick up, kind of where we left off on the backup documentation, ending with the declining balance spreadsheet. Again, an issue that we were coming across is declining balance spreadsheets coming in with missing information or broken formulas. So just be sure to double check. And, you can also look for everything mentioned on this slide in our fact sheet. So here we're gonna talk about a project change request, PCR. When filling out the top section of this form, please fill in as it appears on your Zoomgrants application. So we want to do the sub-grantee name, the project name, the funding year, the grant funding stream, and the job number. In the section below, check what kind of change you'd like to make. So again, you can do a scope of work, an extension, or a budget revision. And then in the section below that, there's a narrative. So you'd want to include the reason for the change. Sorry, is it not popping up again? Okay.
Yeah.
Third. Kind of the reason for the change, what happened, what do you need to change, how will the change solve the problem? To get a PCR form, it can be requested through the DHS Grants email or from a GPA. All right, so now we've got the Zoomgrants University. Zoomgrants University is a great resource. You can type in keywords and phrases in the search bar, and then you can become your own Zoomgrants help desk to figure out issues. On this slide, we had done a QR code, so please use that to get directly to Zoomgrants University and look for issues that you may run across. All right, so an issue we've definitely been running across as well is when an applicant contact leaves. So your applicant contact is kind of the master controller of your award, and you want to be proactive when you come across this situation. So if the person who's currently the application contact, you want to go ahead and pass those credentials off to the new contact, and you can do that by using Zoomgrants University to kind of walk yourself through that. If in the case your application contact does leave without passing along those credentials, you would want to take the following steps. Send an email to the DHS Grants email with the name and email of the old contact, name and email of the new contact, and send that to us. We will go ahead and reach out to the Zoomgrants help, and then you'll be CC'd letting you know when the change has happened.
All right, purchasing and procurement. So we're going to go into a little bit more detail on the state side of purchasing procurement. We saw what the federal partners had to say from their end. So let's talk a little bit about POETE. So POETE stands for Planning, Organization, Equipment, Training, and Exercises. And these are the categories of things that are allowable under most FEMA grants. When filling out your application and submitting your quarterly reports, you'll need to have a good understanding of these categories. And here are some examples of things that might fall into each POETE element. So this is not a complete list, so if you're unsure of where to categorize each item related to your grant, please reach out to us and we can help you figure it out. And then you can also find information on POETE as it relates to each specific grant within the notices of funding opportunity for each program. So as our partners from FEMA explained, when purchasing under a federal grant, you want to use the most restrictive rule. If the federal rule is more restrictive, we have to go by that. If the state rule is more restrictive, we have to go by that. And that's all going to get a little confusing sometimes. And here's a story to give you an example. So the federal guidance states that states and territories, including their agencies and instrumentalities, must follow their own documented procurement policies. Well, Nevada has NRS 332115, which states that certain type of purchases do not have to go out for bid. Remember, the federal government did say to use your own state policy, but they also said to use the most restricted policy. So what do we do here? DEM reached out to FEMA for clarification on this, and this is the response that we got. A Nevada non-state entity must abide by the more restrictive federal standard requiring full and open competition. A non-state entity choosing to implement a less restrictive law than the federal law would potentially not be reimbursed for any procurements where it utilized federal grant funding. So this is coming from J.P. Henderson, Regional Legal Counsel for FEMA Region 9. So what DEM did in response to this is we took a look at all the federal purchasing guidelines and all the state purchasing guidelines and combined the most restrictive policies into one DEM purchasing policy. If you just follow this, you can ensure to stay in compliance when purchasing under federal grants. There are different rules and thresholds when purchasing goods, and then there are different rules for purchasing services or ongoing costs. And there are more details that we weren't able to show here in a slide presentation, but the DEM purchasing policy can be found as an attachment within the resource documents section of all the Zoomgrants applications. And while we're looking at this, please know you'll also be able to find the extended version of the decision from FEMA Region 9 Regional Council that we just talked about, as well as the contract provisions guide that our FEMA partners talked about in their presentation. Again, all of these attachments can be found in the resource document section of your grant application. As we learned, the federal government prefers full and open competition when selecting vendors for products and services. However, sometimes going out for bid isn't the best option, such as when you use proprietary software or you need a certain type of product to be compatible with your existing infrastructure. So in this case, sub-grantees can complete a sole source request for authorization to use a certain vendor or purchase a certain product. You get this form by emailing the dhsgrants@dem.nv.gov email address, which we'll talk a little bit more about near the end. And when completing this form, you'll need to fill it out completely with as much detail as possible. For even more information on the sole source process, check the fact sheet. Another exception to going out for bid is when purchasing something that is already arranged for under a state contract. The state purchasing division has negotiated the absolute best price with these vendors. Plus, there's already a contract in place that contains all of those federal contract provisions that we learned about in the FEMA presentation. Definitely check this website to see if what you need can be found here. And then if your project requires the purchase of equipment, you'll be asked to find the appropriate equipment code from the authorized equipment list or the AEL. We've included a link to this tool in the fact sheet, but you can also find it within your grant application in the budget section. So you can download the list as a CSV file, but it might be easier to just use the search feature to look for keywords. And if you're having trouble finding the right code, just please reach out to us and we can definitely help.
All right, now in closing, we're gonna do an overview. So quarterly reporting again consists of a quarterly financial report and a quarterly progress report. Both need to be submitted together for quarterly submission to really count and due within 30 days of the end of quarter. The formatting that we would like to generally see on those QFRs would be quarter ending, month, day, and year report with the number. There's an example on this slide below of what we'd like to see. This really, using this format, it helps us to process your submissions in a timely manner. Be mindful of your compliance documents. review resource documents within your Zoom Grants application, search Zoom Grants University, or email questions@zoomgrants.com if you need help with your Zoom Grants system. Oh no. Can we? I apologize. Sole source request and project change request are not in Zoom Grants. These must be requested through the DHS grants email or through a GPA.
All right, so please feel free to reach out anytime you have questions, comments, or concerns. The best way to reach us is by the DHS grants email. For a more efficient response, please format the subject line of your email like you see here: fiscal year, grant funding stream, subrecipient name, and then project name. This will ensure your email goes through the proper channels and we can get somebody to reach out to you in a timely manner. This also helps if perhaps your GPA is out of the office or had to go home early and you have an urgent question. This will ensure that it gets to somebody quickly as possible. Some of the things you can reach out to the DHS grants email for are project change requests and sole source requests. Now, both of these forms are not available on the website, so you have to reach out to us and, we'll talk it through and we'll send you the form once we get with you on some instructions a little bit. Requesting to add people to the DEM Grants listserv. So this is where we're going to send out all of our bulletins, all of our scheduled training links, anything that you might want to know related to grants. So if you don't think you're on the DEM Grants listserv or you want to add other people that might need this information, send an email to this dhsgrants@dem.nv.gov and ask to get added. The Zoom Grants inquiries that Carrie talked about. Let us know if your main application contact leaves, and let us know if you add any documentation or make changes to your quarterly reporting. So sometimes you submit them and then maybe there's like not a document attached that we needed to have attached. So Zoom Grants does not let us know when an additional document has been updated. So if you end up having to add something after the fact, go ahead and just shoot us an email and say, hey, I was able to upload this, and then we can continue with processing your quarterly report. Talking about the preparedness grants may come with questions about recovery and mitigation grants. So you can reach out to those departments' emails, which we've included here. And then don't forget to check that fact sheet for more information on the topics that we covered in this presentation. There'll be links to different websites, links to the notices of funding opportunity, and just kind of a quick review and quick reference of everything that we talked about today. And then just to ensure that you have multiple ways to contact the DEM grant staff, we've also included each grant supervisor's contact info. Again, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to reach out to any of these supervisors or the DHS grants inbox. So in closing, we'd like to leave you with a final thought on what we love about grants. So what would we do if our agencies had unlimited budgets? We all want to protect our communities as best we can, but there's never enough money in the budget to do everything we want to do. Federal grants allow state and local jurisdictions to see their ideas come to fruition. Yes, there's a lot of paperwork. Yes, sometimes it feels like it's a lot to take on. But think about how you feel when you see that project come to life and when you see the impact this improved capability has on your community. The paperwork and the processes are never fun, but seeing those big ideas happen really makes it all worth it. We're always here to help you with anything related to your grant so that you can see your agency's ideas become reality. We hope you enjoyed this presentation. We apologize about the technical difficulties. We will be sending these slides out along with the slides from the FEMA presentation and that fact sheet. And then once we get the recording managed and some updates to the website finished, we're going to also put this presentation online, so you'll be able to go back and watch it as you should have seen it. Does anyone have any questions that we can answer? I'm looking through the chat to see if there's anything that we did not address.
So in the meantime, Carrie dropped the link again to that feedback survey. So make sure you fill that out because that'll also have proof of your attendance for the webinar.
All right, well, if no one has any questions, we didn't take you all the way till 4 o'clock, so it looks like you get a whole hour and 20 minutes of your life back. I hope we do good things with it. Thank you everyone for attending, and please reach out anytime.
Yeah, we will stay on here in case any other questions pop up. I do see that Kara asked, is the budget worksheet that's submitted when applying for the grant available in Zoom Grants? Just to make sure I know what you're talking about. You're talking about the Excel spreadsheet that we put out with the hundreds of lines of fun POETE stuff. That one would be available in your Zoomgrants portal. It should still be under your resource documents. Okay. Yeah, so that should be available in your resource documents. If you need another copy of that, feel free to reach out to us in that the DHS grants inbox, and we can send you a fresh copy if you need it.
I want to note that the exception to that is with the SLCGP funding for that. We didn't have you use that sheet to submit your budget. We tried keeping that all within the Zoomgrant system, but we are going to be uploading a budget sheet filled in with the information that you provided us, and that will be in the Zoomgrants account. So if you have SLCGP and you're not seeing that yet, let me know and I can see where we're on that. I think we got all of 22 uploaded and we're still working on 23, but we can definitely check on that if that's something that you need right away.
So David, we're expecting our awards to come out within the next few weeks. We have a pass-through requirement we have to meet. So keep your eyes peeled for an email coming from us over the listserv regarding the approved projects and the notification that you need to go in and check and sign your award. I should clarify that's for HSGP, NSGP, and EMPG. SLCGP is yet to come. Absolutely. So Pamela asks, when submitting a PCR for an extension, sometimes it takes time to receive back and we lose additional time, i.e. we submit a PCR for 6 months. It takes a month to get back. We're left with 5 months. Is it possible to add a month onto the time frame? So it's kind of an awkward answer to your question. Not with the system as we currently have it. We are trying to refine it and make sure that it gets faster. So it used to be we had a 2-day turnaround for a PCR, and so that kind of a system wasn't warranted. We're trying to get back to a more expedient processing of those. But as it stands currently, we can give you another extension should you need it. Or we can talk offline about specifics and trying to make sure that you have enough time to complete your project. Yeah, it sucks. It's just the kind of the status of our grant section right now to be a little behind given the year we've had. So the form that, yep, there it is. Amanda's got you covered on the survey. Oh, absolutely. Thanks for the question, Pat. We're going to stick around for just a few more minutes and see if anyone else has any burning questions before the end of the presentation.
Hi, this is Leslie, next to City of North Las Vegas. I have a question. This is
Go ahead, Leslie.
like slide 2, I think. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Okay, sorry, there was some interference there, but I think we're good now.
Okay. So when it talked about you have to follow the federal requirements for the grant funds, the state law, and then our own procurement guidelines. Little question about following state law. So for DEM, we have got instruction that we have to follow the state purchasing policy, which is not the state law for us. So we're a local government, and state law, that's NRS, has a local government purchasing policy. So we follow the local government state law. And I just want to make sure, I've had legal look at it, and this is the only agency where they have passed that as something that they thought was required to us. Can you give an opinion about that?
Absolutely, and this is something that isn't isolated to your experience in grants. We've gotten this feedback a lot. What fell to us as a decision of a previous administration, that written legal opinion from JP Henderson, is that we have to follow all of the guidelines, not just the local NRS 332, but also the NRS 333 for the federal, or sorry, the state side of things. So in this particular situation, we also ran into some issues. So we deconflicted into that DEM procurement policy. If you just end up following that, you'll be good as far as procurement's concerned. But yeah, that was handed down to us rather than a decision we made to make sure that we follow all applicable guidelines, not just these federal and local, but also that state.
So when you say it was deconflicted, what do you mean by that?
So there was discussions between our attorney with FEMA's attorney, and they came to the decision that they then passed down that written legal opinion. So the
FEMA attorney.
Yeah, and we can, yeah, looks like we just navigated back to that slide if you're able to see that from JP Henderson. He's the Region 9 counsel. So there was a discussion that happened there where the conversation happened between attorneys on, what do we need to do? How do we need to do it? Because there was kind of a strange wording that we needed to deconflict. And that's when I say deconflict, that's what I mean. We had conflict between what is the most restrictive and who has to follow what. And so what was passed down to us is that even though it's, so in your case, I believe you're with Henderson, correct?
North Las Vegas.
North Las Vegas, my apologies. So even though you're with the city of North Las Vegas, you would still have to follow that state procurement.
Okay, and I guess it's one of the reasons it's confusing for us is because it is the only time we're required to do that.
I understand the frustration with it. We're kind of dealing with that as well. And we're trying to have discussions to make sure we're doing the right thing. But I have nothing else to offer at the moment in what we're doing other than take a look at that procurement policy and try to work within those bounds where you can. I understand it's really restrictive, and I apologize for that.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Alrighty, any other questions? Well, hearing none, I appreciate everyone for attending today. Make sure you fill out that survey. We'll make sure to take that feedback into consideration and improve this presentation moving forward. Hopefully it's something that's enduring And we can continue to do it every year and make it more beneficial for all of our stakeholders. If you need to get a hold of us, our contact information has been on the slides. We'll make sure to circulate the slide deck out as well over the listserv. Make sure that everyone has that contact information. You can reach out to me at any time as well as any of my team. We'd be happy to field any questions you have. And with that, thank you again. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Connie, I see you put your hand up. Can we answer a question for you?
Absolutely. I have a question. In Zoom, where each category say planning, travel.
Oh, that's a different Connie. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize we had a couple of that happens to me all the time too as an Amanda. So I know what you mean.
Oh, sorry. Wrong Connie?
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay.
I think Connie Chambers is the one that had her hand up.
Okay, thank you. I have a question though. When we're uploading into Zoom for each category, planning, organization, travel, do you want all the backup in one complete PDF, or you need it all separate per expense?
Are you talking about in the application or when you're doing your quarterly reporting?
Quarterly reporting.
It's really up to you. I mean, it's the main thing is the more organized it is and the more it makes sense, the easier it's going to be for us to process it. So we've gotten some that, we had to kind of go through and we're like, and figure out what it means. And we've got others where there's like arrows drawn and it's like, this is what this is. So as long as it's something that makes sense, if you want to do it all in one or separate attachments, either way is fine with us.
Okay, great. My next question is, because before when I used to do the grant a couple years ago, I would download everything for each line item. So then the line item totals would match the spreadsheet to the declining balance. And lately they've been uploading each individual payment. So there could be like 20 on line 35. Mm-hmm. So it's just a lot of work on our end as far as doing them individually. And I was just wondering if it would be acceptable if we did them all together as one whole scan for each line item.
You're talking about the supporting documentation, right?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, doing them all at once is totally fine.
Okay. And then my next question is, when you want proof of payment, we're a state agency, do you want a DON printout with it, or is it acceptable to have a warrant number that it passed through the system?
If you have a DON printout, that'd be great. If you have a warrant number that you could include in that, we haven't come up across that yet, so that's a really good question, but I imagine it would probably be okay because we have the same system and we can also look that up.
Okay.
If I'm wrong, I apologize, but give it a try and see.
Yeah, no worries. Our actual cover sheet does include a warrant number when it went through Dawn with the date.
Okay. Maybe if you can, like we were talking about, like do some kind of call out to draw attention to that as well.
Okay. Okay. I just wanted to confirm to make sure that would be acceptable.
Yeah, that's a good question. We have a lot of new state agencies that have applied for some of our grants too, so I'm sure it'll come up again.
Oh, okay, yeah, no worries. I believe that's all I have at this moment. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Anybody else have any questions? Well, thank you all. Reach out to us anytime. Have a good day.